Alright guys, I'm Tony. This is my best buddy Gabriel. We're back in the arcade wood shop. I was going to get started on the Frankenstein cabinet today, but I'm kind of behind on getting a panel made for a buddy of mine. We have to build a set of control panels for a Williams Joust cocktail. And this is what I've got to work with. This is an original Joust control panel for a cocktail that I've had on my shelf that a friend of mine, Jennifer Hall, sent me along with the cabinet. But someone has cut out all the main parts of it. So me and this guy have got together. He sent me a set of brand new pretty overlays, acrylic overlays. So we're going to match up the holes with the joystick and the button off of these acrylic overlays. And I'm going to make the control panel to match what I've got. So when they come together, it should be perfect. But it's going to be a little challenging because of the angles and lining up the holes for the joystick. But stick around, we'll get it done. Is that good enough? You ready? Let's do it. Okay, first thing we have to do is we have to rip our plywood, and this is 3/4 commercial grade maple plywood. Very good stuff. You want to take your overlay and get your measurements. Now you can take a tape measure and measure it, and it comes up just a little bit over 7 inches. And then you can transfer that measurement using your tape measure to your table saw and hope that you get it exactly right. Or you can just take your plexiglass overlay, lay it beside the fence, place it up to this toot on your blade, bump your fence until it's all the way up against the toot to where it will slide really easy, but not too tight that it jams. But then you should have the exact measurement you need for the width. Okay? Very, very simple. But it is 7 inches. And a lot of people can read a tape measure but don't know how to read it correctly. Because each one of those lines, you can which of these read, the outside or the inside of the line. Okay? You always read them the same way every single time. And but just to be easier, just use your template to go by. So then we'll turn the table saw on, and we'll rip this piece. Now, the reason I cut 4 pieces is because I need a right, and a left control panel for the cocktail. The other 2 pieces are going to be for a set for myself because I always need a template in the shop for everything I make. So we're going to make this. Now, you need to figure out the measurements for the length of your control panel. And you can measure from corner to the longest, okay, and figure out how many little marks you're gonna have. That's the hard way to do it. You can take it to your miter saw and cut it off, but I like to use what's called a table saw sled, and we'll have to cut the angle first before we cut it to length. Now, you could cut it to length and go back, but you have to be actually very accurate, or you take a chance of messing up. So let me get the sled. We'll show you how that's done, and we'll figure out the angle, the best way to get the angle, and I will show you step by step how this is done. So stick around. Okay guys, the tools that you need to do this process of cutting this angle is a square. We're squaring up the end of your control panel, make sure everything's square. Then you need a T-bevel. Okay, the T-bevel is for getting the angle on the wood. So you can match it and transfer it to the table saw. Now, this T-bevel right here is about 40 bucks. And I love this T-bevel. This is a very, very nice T-bevel. But I'm not using this one. You can get one at Harbor Freight for a couple bucks. Works just as good. May not last as long, but it does work just as good. But for this, we're not even going to use the T-bevels. Okay, all we're going to use is the table saw sled, which is a piece of plywood with a straight edge here that's lined up to cut everything at a 90-degree angle. And to make sure we get the angle exactly right, we're going to take the overlay and we're going to place it up against the blade to make sure we match the angle perfect. And we don't want the edge touching any of the teeth, okay, because that will throw it off. So we want to make sure the teeth are up above the plexiglass. Push it in there like so. Then you have this. And that will give you a perfect angle without having to go out and buy a T-bevel. Next, I have a straight piece of scrap material that I'm going to place up against the edge of the overlay. And make sure that's a straight piece because you want to lay your pieces up against it. Okay, and then hold it in place and staple it into place. And I use staples because I staple to this sled all the time, and that way I can pull them off and they don't have anything to worry about. So I'm going to go ahead and nail those down, then we'll cut those panels and get started. Okay, now that we got that nailed in place, we'll take our overlay and kind of check the alignment of the edges and get really, really good spot on them. So we're going to take the scrap piece of material. Now the blade cuts in this groove, and the groove is already there. So if you put the point of your control panel on that groove, that's where it'll cut to. So I've got this camera tripod set up on the sled, so you'll get to see the whole action of it being moved through the blade. So let's cut this and give you an idea. Now that gives you a perfect angle that matches your overlay. You don't have any overhang, you don't have any wood showing. It's a perfect match. So now all we have to do is cut this one to length. And we're going to do that later as soon as I cut the rest of these. So give me just a second and I'll cut these and we'll get back to it. Okay guys, for this part of the cut, we're going to cut the square edge. Okay, and we want to make sure it's identical to this lengthwise so that overlay fits on there perfect. So we're right here, we have this is called a saw stop. which can adjust the length of what you want to cut. You want to take your control panel, flip it over, push your sled up to where it's touching the tooth on your blade, because that's where it's going to cut. You don't let it go in or too far or out too far. And then you'll take your saw stop, loosen it up, and you'll slide it over here. Now, since this is cut on an angle and my saw stop's on a 90-degree angle, it's not going to give me a very accurate stop. So what I'm going to have to do is take a small block of wood, put it up against the fence and against the overlay, push my saw stop to where I want it, and lock it down. Now, when I cut these, the point of the wood will go into here, and it should cut them to a perfect length. So let's cut one and see how it does. Okay guys, that's how you cut out the perfect panel without having to use a tape measure or a T-bevel or pretty much a square. I didn't check them, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be square because that sliding table saw is perfectly square, and it is dead on. So that's how accurate these table saw sleds can be. So if you don't have one and you do a lot of cabinet repair, I would recommend building you one of these sleds. You can Google it on YouTube, Google it or look on YouTube, and it'll show you how to make these. They're a lot more accurate than your sliding gauges for your table saw or using a miter saw. I hate a miter saw. I use most of the table saw for everything. But that's how you cut that. Now, we've got to do the holes for the control panel. And since I'm having to work off of the new overlays because my original was destroyed, we're going to have to match these holes up and copy everything over to the wood and go from there. So we'll start that here in just a few minutes. Okay, now that I'm back, we just finished cutting these before I had to put you guys on hold while I went and took Gable for his walk, and then he reminded me he had to go eat, and then he wanted to run uptown to the pet store to get him a cookie for dessert. So while I've been gone for about an hour and a half, I'm sorry I made you guys wait, but we'll get back to the project. So what you want to do is, this is the most important part, lining up the holes. If the holes are not lined up, it doesn't make a diddly squat how accurate this is, because where the placement of the holes is the most important. So what we're going to do is we'll take our piece of wood, put it against the straight edge where it won't move, take another piece of wood, and clamp it together. That way that piece cannot slide. Then you take your overlay, put it into place, take your pencil, and trace out where the holes are going to be. That one's done. Same thing with this one. Excuse me. Now you have a perfect layout for where your holes are going to go. Now the problem is you have to find the center of those so you'll know where to drill your holes. You know where to do it? you know what to do. Okay, well, get in. I'm glad you do. Thank you, Gabriel. Then you'll take your square, and this is the easiest way to do it. Lay your square on the edge, put it on your pencil mark, on the edge of your pencil mark, and draw your line. Same way on the other side. Do the same thing on this one. Then you have your alignment for your holes. Do it the same way on the top and the bottom. Then the best way to find the center of a hole is to take a straight edge, just anything you've got laying around, we'll just use this, and you go corner to corner, and you'll make a mark. There's your center. That's where your drill bit's going to start. And it's perfect. It'll be perfect every time. You can do the same thing here, and I'm going to lay these out so then I can go back and show you how to set them up on the drill press and drill those out. So we'll do that as I lay these other ones out, and then we'll come back and we'll do the drill press. Okay, now that I've got all the holes laid out for the joystick and for the button, you'll notice I put a J here and a B here. And the reason being is you have this slot, and on a normal control panel for a Joust, you have a joystick that this sets into. On these, you don't use this joystick. You have a little round joystick that sets in a hole. So we're going to drill this out, and you want to have this rectangle oval, and then your button. Now, these holes are a little bit odd sized, and they have a good bit of play in them, and that's good. The reason for that is when you install your overlay, if you don't install it exactly right, you can still have a little bit of adjustment on your on your button, because of this lip on the buttons. And this is an original Williams button that I keep around just to make sure. And I always like to go just a little bit bigger on this, because if I cut it exactly the same size and the wood was to shrink, then you have a hard time changing these buttons out. And it gives you a little more adjustment in case you don't get the overlay lined up exactly perfect. Makes no difference. It just works out better. If everything is cut exactly right and you make a mistake installing this overlay, you can't pull it back off. But with making the holes just a little bigger, that gives you a little bit of adjustment. You can move this either way that it covers good. So we're going to go to the drill press, and we're going to drill out these holes. And I also marked out here for the lights to shine through the overlay where it says Joust. Here, that's backlit. So you want to cut those out too. But we're going to go set up the drill press, and we'll see how to drill these holes. So here we go. And that's how you drill out your holes. Now this hole here for the joystick is recessed a little bit because there's a small dust washer that has to go in there. So now I need to line up the holes for mounting the joystick and then cut out the T-molding edge and run a bevel on one side and make the legs. So here we go. Okay, now this is how the joystick hole is supposed to look. There's a little recess, and we have that for the dust washer. Then you have these holes. Now, those holes are for mounting the screws. And I don't have the joystick, but I do have this Defender pattern that I made that uses the same joystick. So what I've done is I've transferred that to a little pattern that matches up to that just perfectly. So now I can take this and place it on here on the back side, line it up with the holes, take my square, square it up so I know that it's running square with the rest of the panel. And then all I have to do is mark my holes to know that I've got them where they're supposed to be. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll drill these holes and recess this, and all the holes will be done soon. Okay, now that I've got the control panel clamped to my table saw to where it will move, but it won't move as much. I've got my flush trim bit set in my router. I've got my depth set so it will not touch the router, the table saw. And we're going to cut this out right fast. And that's how you cut out the control panel for a Defender cocktail. Now, I have to make a note and give an apology to my buddy, Charlie at Overtime Arcades. Check out his YouTube channel. He's a good guy. I recommended a router for Charlie and the type of bit to use to do this kind of cut. But I didn't explain to him, when you're making this kind of cut, this bit will absolutely cut out exactly what your pattern is. If your pattern's a little bit in bad shape, it's going to follow that same shape. And if it's bad, it's going to transfer the bad to your new wood. So always, if your wood is chopped out or busted out, always go back with pieces of strips and tack them into place to clean the edges up so they're straight. And then you'll have a perfectly square cutout. If not, if you have one that's imperfect, your new piece is going to be imperfect because it's going to be just exactly like the original, because this bit rolls on the original. But guys, that's how you make the control panel for a Williams Joust cocktail. I'm going to go back and run the T-molding groove in, and you guys already know how to do that. And then I'll send it, get it sent out to the customers. Hope you enjoyed the video. Have a nice evening. Gable, you want to tell them bye? Wake up, boy, you're supposed to be working. Everybody, have a good evening.